So this could be the death of me, or maybe just a better me, by Darker in the Day. Chapter 2, in which Jake Lockley saves Mark Spector. Every day I wake up, then I start to break up. Leery from sleep, Mark lifts his head off the pillow and feels around blindly for his phone. He succeeds in knocking it off the dresser, along with a cup of water Stephen must have gotten in the middle of the night, and barely manages to catch the cup before it shatters on the floor. Lonely is a man without love. The alarm continues, not at all bothered about being relocated to the floor. Every day I start out. Fuck, I hate this song. Still holding the half-empty glass, Mark decides he's too tired for this and does what any responsible author would do. Stephen! Stephen wakes up with a jolt and promptly spills the remainder of the water all over himself. Oh, bugger! What the? Mark! Sleeping. Mark calls out, decidedly lying, and Stephen sighs. Sleeping with a half-full glass of water in your hand, is that right? It's your day job. Mark complains, not addressing the water thing. Get through it, Stephen. I have a date tonight. I need my beauty sleep. That doesn't make sense. It's our face. Your face doesn't make sense, Mark says lamely. It's our... Stephen trails off grumbling. I'll see how it is. I'm the mom of the job, and I'm also the one who has to wake up at 8 in the morning. Well, yeah, those two go hand in hand. Mark yawns. Besides, you know how shitty my accent is. Believe me, it's ass. I covered for you a few times. You're welcome, by the way. And Donna kept asking me if I had a cold. Mark puts on his British accent just to really drive the message home. And if he exaggerates how bad it is, little, no one really has to know. But know what she's on about, isn't it right, mate? Stephen winces. I'll take over for my shift if it means you won't do that again. Deal, Mark says happily, and Stephen sighs. He's not actually annoyed about having to go to his job. He likes his new job, which is a feeling he's not used to, having spent months under Donna's management. After he was fired from the National Art Gallery, Stephen gave up most of his aspirations towards becoming a museum tour guide and started looking for vacancies in libraries and bookshops. What else was he supposed to do with the English degree to his name that Mark refuses to disclose is real or not? Problem was, no one really wanted to hire a man who couldn't even keep a job at a gift shop. That is, until a letter showed up one day at their flat congratulating Stephen on being hired as a guide at the British Museum. I don't remember submitting my resume to the British Museum, Stephen had wondered, holding the letter in his hands carefully, as if he'd been afraid to tear it. Weird, Mark had said, and had made a mental note to get rid of the burner phone he'd used to fake a reference for one Mr. Stephen Grant with. So now, Stephen has a fulfilling full-time job as a guide to the Egyptian exhibit in the British Museum. Mark gets to just hang out and make useless commentary all day, and as a bonus, the pay from the museum is surprisingly comfortable. So really, who the hell needs Khonshu? Stephen's shift goes well. There are a few groups that day, some tourists and some regulars, all of whom laugh at his jokes and stay appropriately quiet and ask questions at the right time. He gets asked out twice, which is something he's grown slightly used to as his confidence has improved. He also gets to help a kid with her history homework. Mark mostly stays in the background, planning his date with Layla. At one point, in the break between tour groups, he pops into Stephen's consciousness and asks, casual or formal? To his credit, Stephen only jumps a little. Sorry? I'm taking Layla out to a bar tonight. It's nothing too fancy, but not one of those dive bars. Do I go semi-formal or just casual and normal? Semi-formal, Stephen says immediately, with a dark button-up shirt. Well, no matter what will pale in comparison to Layla, but at least give it some effort. I always give it some effort. Mark grumbles, though he knows Stephen's right. Do you, though? Stephen asks, and later trips unexpectedly in front of his last tour of the day. His palms sting with the impact of bracing himself on the floor, and even though he clambers to his feet immediately, laughing it off, the moment he gets a quiet second, he mutters to himself, Don't think I'll bloody forget that. Mark's laugh echoes in Stephen's head as he finishes the tour. As the end of his shift arrives, Stephen ducks into the employee break room to grab his things. Mark walks out a few minutes later, beelining straight for the museum exit. It's not too bright in London today, though the sun is out. It casts a pleasant warmth on Mark's skin, mingled with the chill of a spring breeze. There's a couple hours before Layla arrives at their flat. which is more than enough time for him to shower and change. Everything's fine. All in all, Mark's actually having a fairly good day. His good day lasts up until the moment he gets shot in the chest. That's an event that usually tends to sour things, and this is no exception. It happens like this. Marc takes a shortcut home. It shaves maybe 5 minutes off the walk, but it's a shortcut nonetheless because Marc's never been awfully patient anyway. It's 7 p.m. in May, and in London, that still means the streets are reasonably bright. And besides, who jumped Marc in broad daylight? Turns out they were still possible candidates. He hears footsteps behind him in the alley he's in, crunching against the gravel, and turns to see 3 figures blocking the way he came. Narrowing his eyes, Marc turns back around and sees 5 strangers slowly closing in on him from the front. What is this early caroling? Marc's tense, his mouth dry, already moving into a defensive stance. There's no delusion that this is a friendly confrontation. He's a well-trained fighter, but taking on 8 at once is a challenge for anyone, and without the armor. Because if so, I'm Jewish, and I'll take a rain check.
You know what this is, Spectre,
one of the strangers says, and as she walks into view, there's a twinge of recognition. You're Harrow's cultists. He recognizes her from the warehouse they took Stephen to. Sure enough, when she moves, there's a scale tattoo on the dark skin of her wrist.
We're no cult, she spits. We're amidst loyal servants who followed Arthur Harrow for the leadership he brought. We were going to change the world.
I've heard this monologue before, Marc says, eyes narrowing as the group of 8 close in on him. Also, you were living in a closed-off community, growing your own crops and doing weird shit in a secluded little location. Textbook cult stuff, I'm just saying. As he speaks, Marc rolls the sleeves of his shirt up, adding, I thought you would scatter after Harrow got committed.
She barks out a sardonic laugh. Oh, listen to yourself. Committed. Like you didn't kill him.
The world stops for a moment. For a split second, he's back in the pyramid, breathing in the scent of chiral dust and human sweat. He remembers Harrow's defeated form on the stone slab, defenseless and exposed. He remembers the feeling of the moon blade, cold and heavy in his hand, the chilling presence of Khonshu's presence hovering over his mind, urging him to move, urging him to kill. He's free from Khonshu. Stephen had made sure of that. They're free. Right? Marc's blood runs cold, and all of a sudden, it seems even the sun darkens. Lunar eclipse, he thinks nonsensically, and out loud he mumbles, What?
You think we wouldn't be keeping an eye on him? Harrow's body contained the spirit and power of Amit. We weren't going to let that go so easily.
What do you mean, I killed him? Marc demands. Something in his mind shifts uncomfortably, as if trying to jog loose a vital memory that he doesn't remember, or that was hidden.
Shot at point-blank range, body dumped in a river, the cultist says. We saw the security footage. We saw you take him.
Marc, what's she saying? There's a terribly familiar fear in Stephen's sudden voice, one Marc hasn't heard since the first few days Stephen was figuring out Marc's existence. It's a fear of Marc, and that's worse than any murder accusation anyone could fling at him. You killed Harrow? I didn't. Marc insists, eyes wide. I didn't kill him. I don't serve Khonshu anymore. I'm not carrying out his fucking dirty work. I don't do that shit anymore, Stephen. You know that.
You can lie to yourself all you want, Marc Spectre. But at the end of the day, Harrow was right.
The cultist flashes a nasty smile, drawing one hand behind her.
You are a deeply, deeply broken man, and the worst part of it is, you don't know the extent of it.
Pace off! Stephen snaps, and though Marc quickly regains control of the body, he can't help but laugh at the alarmed look on the cultist's face. I wasn't done, Marc. Tell her she you bloody shove it up her ass.
Stephen grunts, the cultist drawls. Fighting his battles for him. You're not even real, aren't you?
Why do you care so much? You leave him out of this. Marc snarls.
Trying so hard to defend your loved ones, but it won't atone for all that you've done.
Someone seizes Marc's arms from the back, multiple sets of hands gripped tightly and holding him down as he struggles to break free to no avail.
You're a killer, Marc Spectre, and it's time for you to face judgment.
The knife flashes out fast, and it's actually Steven that dodges it, jerking Marc out of a horrified stupor as his upper body moves on its own and ducks beneath the blade. He's not sure if it's him or Steven that's in control as they throw their weight forward and break free of the cultist's hold, punching another man in the gut as they stumble a few steps. "Marc, focus!" Steven hisses, and then Marc's in control, his fingers flexing as he curls them into fists. Right. If you let us die, I'm going to be extremely cross. Will do my best to avoid dying. With that, Marc takes a blow to the gut and grips hold of his attacker's arm, pulling her close so he can take her out with a hard glance to her side. Lowering his head and charging forward, he tackles another cultist and slams him into the hard pavement. The cultist groans with pain and stays down. Fighting without the armor is unsettling because every single hit that Marc takes stays and hurts as he moves. There's no moonblade, no truncheons, nothing for him to fight with but his bare, uncovered hands. But Marc makes do. 5 cultists are down for the count when he hears the click of a gun behind him. The sound of the safety being flicked off. It's a sound that has him instinctively freezing, the hairs on the back of his neck standing in alarm.
"A valiant effort," the female cultist says, victory smug in her voice. "But a fitter one, nonetheless."
Marc turns slowly and sees the muzzle of a handgun pointed straight at him from less than 2 feet away. There's no missing from that kind of distance. "Amit's gone," he says quietly, raising his hands in surrender. "You're free to live out their lives in peace. Judgment will come in the duat, sure, maybe. But for now, that's not your problem."
She considers this. "You may be right, but you are a problem."
"I am highly offended," Marc says, by something that I completely agree with.
"And I think we would be doing the world a favor by ridding it of you."
Her finger comes to rest on the trigger.
"Night, Marc Spectre."
The sound of the shot echoes through the alley, quieted enough to be almost inconspicuous by the silencer attached to the gun. Not for the first time, a bullet lodges itself firmly in Marc's heart, tearing through skin and cartilage. Falling forward onto his knees, Marc thinks absurdly, Steven's going to be so pissed about this. And then the pain explodes, blood pounding in his head, clouding his vision with dizziness. The bullet must have grazed his lung because Marc coughs wetly and tastes the copper of blood. This is where we die. Hours away from meeting Layla. Weeks after fighting an unfathomable battle in Cairo, after getting rid of the shackles of Moon Knight, after turning his back on Khonshu for good. After all they've been through, Marc and Steven are going to die bleeding out from a gunshot wound in a London alley. This is where we die. Panic seizes him, helplessness rushing in as Marc's thoughts start jumbling in desperation. I don't want to die. I don't want Steven to die. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Mind clouded with pain and fear, Marc hardly registers it when his vision goes black.
"Dead,"
Emma denounces smugly as she helps one of her fallen teammates up. Her gun is tucked back into her belt, still warm from the shot.
"Just as I had intended."
"Easier than I thought it would be," someone says, groaning as he stands up. "Good fucking riddance."
"Spectre's no more than a coward and a murderer,"
she says as the last of her group gets to their feet.
"And he died like one too. Come on, we should get out of here."
There are a few things to note when fighting Marc Spectre. First of all, it's good to know that his movements are nearly impossible to replicate. Marc fights unpredictably, taking some blows to be able to deal with others, rushing headfirst into a brawl instead of fighting with trained logic. Maybe it's due to his experience as an underground boxer. Then again, maybe it's just the way he is. Second, if you're lucky, you'll sometimes get a cameo appearance from Stephen Grant. Usually not for long, but long enough for a few quibs and some well-placed hits. Stephen doesn't fight as wild as Marc, but he's faster sometimes, sneakier. It would be a mistake to underestimate him. Thirdly, and arguably most importantly, is this. If you somehow get into a fight with Marc Spectre and gain the upper hand, it's imperative to not let your guard down. Even if he's bloodied, panting and half conscious on the ground, relaxing your guard is a good way to ensure a direct trip to the emergency room. And it is direct. That means no passing go, no collecting 200. That means no turning your back on a presumed dead Marc, no gloating over your victory as you walk away, no thinking it's as easy as that. Because if you do, You'll miss the part where his eyes start to glow a bright white, bandages wrapping around his knuckles and arms and body. You'll miss the part where his back arches as Khonshu's armor encases him, blades solidifying into existence and gleaming in fading daylight. You'll miss the part where he slowly but steadily gets to his feet, the crumpled bullet forcing its way out of his chest and clattering to the floor. You'll miss the part where Jake Lockley grins viciously and draws his blade. Oigan, cabrones. The taste of blood still lingers in his mouth, and a familiar feeling of protective rage surges into his veins. They hurt Mark. They hurt Steven. Now he'll hurt them. Jake watches as the cultists stiffen, as they turn back slowly, as their eyes widen in fear at the sight of him. He lets the mask fall away. He's never been one for hiding under it anyway. Where do you think you're going? He doesn't give them the chance to answer before the moon blade's flying, embedding itself in someone's gut. Then Jake's moving, another blade leaving his hand and finding a new home in someone's shoulder. He ducks beneath a hasty blow and swings a fist that leaves his opponent spitting blood, immediately twisting around to tackle another man to the ground, no pulling any punches as he leaves the cultist bloodied and unconscious. It takes all of 10 seconds for Jake to take out 7 of Amit's followers. None of them are dead, which took some restraint on Jake's part, but he figured it would be too big of a headache for Mark. But they'll all undoubtedly require medical attention. Emmett's last, the newly appointed leader of Amit's followers, backed up against the wall as Jake straightens up and looks at her. She has her gun pointed at his head. His mask slides into place just as she starts shooting, the bullets rebounding off the impenetrable fabric. One shot after the other, she empties the gun to no avail. A bullet buries itself in Jake's shoulder. His body spits it back out. Eventually, Emmett runs out of bullets and swings the butt of the empty handgun at Jake. He dodges it effortlessly, grabbing her outstretched arm and twisting it painfully until the weapon drops from her fingers. Taking advantage of her panic, he grabs her by the collar of her shirt and slams her up against the brick wall. Wincing at the rough stone digging into her back, Emmett sputters out, "Spector! How—" "Not Mac Spector," Jake says, letting the armor draw away until it's him standing in the clothes Steven picked out in the morning, and Emmett looks dazed. He laughs in her face. "Guess you don't know as much as you think you do now, do you?" "Who?" "Doesn't matter," he interrupts, still tasting bitter copper. His Brooklyn accent becomes more pronounced, the protectiveness simmering in his blood not quite yet satiated. "What you need to know was this, yeah? Mark may have knocked out half you guys without the armor, but he's a nice guy. He's a sweetheart compared to me, you got that?" "You—" "Me?" Jake agrees. "You lay a single fucking figure on him again, him or Steven, and I'll kill you just like I did dear old Harrow." Realization dawns on Emmett's face. Realization and fear. "So you stay away from Mark and Steven, yeah?" It's not a question, not really. Both of them know that full well. And we won't have a problem. ¿Entiendes? For a moment, Emmett looks like she wants to fight, but Jake's tight grip prevents any chance of that. As she glares, a look filled with unbelievable hatred, and finally spits out the reluctant, "Fine!" "Good. Now," one of Jake's hands drifts to his chest where Steven's shirt is torn and wet with blood. "You showed us earlier. Usually I'd return the favor. Un ojo por un ojo, sabes? But I'm not going to kill you." Disbelief shines through panic on Emmett's face. "You're not?" "Not because I don't want to," Jake concedes, "but because Mark doesn't need to deal with this shit right now. Besides, I'm a man of my word. And trust me, I'd take great pleasure in hunting you down if you touch Mark or Steven again. Pero por ahora." His hands wrap around Emmett's throat, tightening. "Night-night," Jake murmurs and waits until her pulse slows under his touch to release her and back away. Emmett slumps against the wall and slides down, unconscious alongside the rest of Emmett's followers, all 8 of them down for the count. "I have terrible dreams."
"Jake."
The voice comes halfway through his shower. Jake curses, grabs for a towel, accidentally switches the water over to freezing, and stumbles out of the bathroom with a towel wrapped haphazardly around his waist. Khonshu standing in the middle of their flat, an unimpressed look on his face, or rather giving off an unimpressed expression while not really having facial muscles.
"You are undressed."
"I was showering," Jake snaps. "This couldn't have waited."
"I do not like to be kept waiting."
Khonshu tilts his head.
"You used the armor today."
"Thought that was the point of keeping me as Moon Knight."
He knows that's not what Khonshu meant.
That is not what I meant.
Of course it wasn't.
You used it to save Mark Spector and Stephen Grant. You were just exposing it to them.
If they die, I die.
Jack leaves out the sentimental part. Khonshu's not exactly the sappy type, possibly due to his literal lack of a heart.
You would have had to go looking for another warrior that night. Now, you don't have to. I saved you the trouble. You're welcome.
Khonshu narrows his eyes.
Was it wise? They could have found out.
No me importa.
Jake says dismissively because it's true. He couldn't give less of a shit about keeping himself secret if it meant risking Mark and Stephen.
Now, what do you want? Or was this just the Egyptian god equivalent of a bank calling me to ask about suspicious purchases?
You are beginning to sound like the worm.
Khonshu says displeased.
If you must be so hasty, there is a new job for you. Tonight, you must leave for Paris.
Well there. Tonight?
Jake shakes his head.
No can do.
What do you mean you cannot do?
We've got other things planned.
Jake thinks of Mark's date with Layla. He thinks of Stephen's new museum job. And he strengthens his resolve.
It is not your place to decide when your missions will take place.
Khonshu's tone is sneering, disdainful.
You are to be my soldier, my...
Avert the business, bitch.
Jake interrupts. Then switching to Spanish. I'm not your servant. I've never been your servant. I carry out your missions because I can, not because I blindly obey when you send me to all corners of the earth at your whim. Being a god, Khonshu is unfazed by Spanish. He is, however, very much fazed by Jake's words.
I saved your life.
You saved Mark's life.
Yes, we're in the same body, but it was very specifically Marc Spector you entrusted to be Moon Knight. Mark owed you a debt. Mark has since repaid that debt. Jake shrugs. He spent quite some time thinking about this in the downtime between missions and the rare occasions he confront without suspicion.
To put it plainly, we don't have to do anything for you.
What's your attitude, son?
If Isaac's could glimmer, Khonshu's does.
Don't forget who it is that gives you your armor.
So if I disobey, you free me from being Moon Knight?
Jake stares down the god, every inch the no-nonsense Brooklyn cabbie refusing to be intimidated.
I'll win either way, Khonshu.
Your insolence will have consequences.
But it's an empty threat.
Khonshu doesn't want Mark and Stephen to know about him either. Jake suspects the gods had enough of them for several millennia, and now for the first time, affection for the two tugs a small smile to his face.
I'll go on your new mission this Friday,
when Stephen has a day off from being a guide.
No sooner. You can tell me the details then.
Khonshu regards him with empty eyes.
Very well, Jack Lockley.
Now get out of our apartment,
Jake says and turns away. He doesn't need to turn back to know that Khonshu's gone. He walks over to the fish tank and bids a small "get out" to Gus 2 and Towelettes. Before stopping at their closet, opening it, Jake stares at all the shirts and jackets and pants and turns a furrowed look back to the fish.
You wouldn't happen to remember what Steven said we should wear, right?
They don't answer, which is typical of fish, but it's disappointing anyway. Heaving a sigh, Jake grabs a random shirt.
Bueno, a la verga.
Roughly 2 hours after he walked out of the museum, Mark startles awake on his bed and promptly falls off of it in disorientation. Banging his head against the bed frame, he groans. What the fuck? Alleyway. Emmett's followers. Fight. Gun. He was shot. He was dying. What the hell? He says to himself, voice shaking. Mark? Stephen, just as confused and dazed as he is. Mark, what happened? I don't know. Slowly and tentatively, Mark puts a hand to his chest. Nothing. No bullet hole, no wound, no blood, not even a scar. Inexplicably, Mark starts laughing, chuckling in relief and leaning his head back against the bed, grinning up at the ceiling. Have you got bunkers? Stephen asks incredulously. It was just a dream. Mark exhales. Just a dream, Stephen. That's all it was. It felt... Stephen trails off. We were shot, weren't we? Think so. One hell of a dream. Probably just a flashback to what happened in that tomb. Stumbling to his feet, Mark belatedly realizes that his clothes have changed. From the shirt Stephen picked out this morning to a dark button-up. When did we get home? When did we change? Don't know. I don't remember. Mark catches sight of something on the dining table. When did we get a bouquet? Stephen sounds just as clueless as he is, both of them staring at the small bundle of roses wrapped carefully in paper, a little note that reads, "For Layla," attached to it. You didn't get that? I don't think so. But before he can think too much on it, Mark catches sight of the digital clock in their kitchen and swears, "Oh, fuck, we're gonna be late. I'm gonna be late. Do we look alright? Is this okay?" Yeah, we look great," Stephen says distractedly. "Alright, grab the flowers, your wallet, don't forget the keys, that will be annoying." "Got it, okay." They make it out the apartment in record time, both of them too busy bickering in the elevator to notice Jake smirking as he watches them. He doesn't know when, if ever, he'll make his appearance to Mark and Stephen, but he's more than content to watch them from the sidelines for the time being. For now, they're all safe, and not even Khonshu can touch that. Not on Jake Lockley's watch.